Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Chown. I'm pleased to welcome you to the webinar today on inclusive recruitment. Cobalt HR has been doing a range of webinars over recent months on a host of topics, and none's more important than getting the recruitment process correct. So we've got lots of content for you today, and we will send out the slides afterwards, so don't worry about taking copies. I just wanted to introduce my fellow presenters. So if I could ask Fanny to say hello.
Welcome everyone. My name is Fanny Fejes and I'm the HR officer at Cobalt HR. And I hope you will find today's webinar really insightful. Thank you.
And if I could also introduce Nick Alston from Cardiff and Vale College.
Hi, good morning everybody. Yeah, nice to meet you all and look forward to chatting to you all at the end.
Fabulous. So just a couple of ground rules. If I could ask you to keep your microphone on mute unless you're going to comment, and also keep any questions for the end, though we have got some interaction at various points of the session. And just as a polite reminder to keep comments respectful, that would be really helpful. So if I could just show you a brief slide, which has got some of our clients, some of the companies that we work for, and they form sort of two areas really: sport organisations and other private sector type businesses, often around technology or accountancy. So those are the sort of companies and reflect sort of quite a broad range really. So this is what we're going to cover with you this morning. So what does inclusive recruitment like? You know, how does it differ from what we've done before? Why is it important? There's some risks and benefits we're going to talk about. What's wrong with what we've been doing? So it's useful to have that clear in our minds to make sure that we do the right thing and we do things differently. Essential elements of inclusive recruitment. So what we're going to do is look at 10 steps to improve our processes and the way that we operate recruitment and selection in our organisations. Then we've got a small section at the end then on how we can help you, and also Cardiff and Vale College will come back, or Nick will then come back on the call and talk to you about how Cardiff and Vale College can help you as well. And then we're hoping we're going to have a little bit of time for a summary and some Q&A at the end. So just to give you a heads up on the pace and timing, so we're hoping the slides will take us about 50 minutes because we've got some interactions in there as well. It is going to be interactive, so there'll be things for you to do so you don't switch off, and also it'll be very informative. So we're going to keep the pace fairly lively to make sure we cover everything. So just to give us a little bit of an idea of what you're looking to get out of the session, could you please go into the chat and just put maybe one comment about what you're looking to get out and how we can help you? Yeah, so it's been suggested from sport organisations, what things are critical. We'll cover all that during the session. These things, if it's critical for sport organisations, it will apply to all the others as well. Any other things anyone would like to share? Okay, well, we'll hopefully we'll give you lots of ideas as we're going through as well, and I think we're covering quite a lot of interesting information for you to take away. So I'm going to hand over to Fanny now, who's going to take the topic forward, and I will be back on the call shortly.
Thank you, Kerry. Welcome everyone again. So before we are giving away those 10 valuable steps, I thought we would set the scene and just clarify what inclusive recruitment looks like. And two important terms here are inclusion and diversity, which often go hand in hand. But it is important what they mean and how they differ from each other. So diversity is about recognizing differences. It is acknowledging the benefits. For example, having a diverse range of perspectives in decision making. On the other hand, inclusion is where employees' differences are valued and used to enable everyone to thrive at work. So what does inclusion recruitment look like, the definition? So inclusive recruitment refers to the process of attracting, shortlisting, assessing, interviewing, and appointing employees across a broad spectrum of backgrounds and orientations. It goes beyond simply being open to different groups, applying or recruiting people from underrepresented backgrounds, because it does not tick off the box. Instead, we need to ensure that recruitment is fair, free from bias and any form of discrimination, that it is transparent and equitable. And by equitable, we mean to provide equal opportunities for candidates. And it might not mean having the same process for everyone, but adjusting to different individual needs so that candidates have equal access and opportunities. For example, in reality, many hiring managers have the inaccurate belief that people with disabilities cannot perform as well on the job as others, which is untrue and unfair. So hiring managers don't have to lower the bar when it comes to performance, but they do have to open the door wider to include those who are routinely overlooked. A company with an inclusive hiring strategy is where they have a diverse recruitment team, and it sends a clear message that inclusivity is part of the company culture, and it can attract a wider variety of candidates of different backgrounds or orientations. And on this basis, inclusive recruitment is designed to eliminate as much bias as possible when hiring for positions. And since everyone has unconscious biases that can affect the way they interact with others, including who they choose to hire, raising awareness can create a more inclusive process that attracts diverse talent. It is really about unlocking the potential value of people and ensuring that inclusive hiring strategy and process are bias-free. So moving on to why it's important. From the business sense, 4 in 5 candidates globally say diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace are important to them. So it is important to get the reputation right. Inclusivity in the recruitment can support the brand of the organization as one cares about diversity and inclusion, which then mirrors the customer base. Having a diverse team and creating an atmosphere that welcomes all individuals and encourages equal engagement and representation are fundamental to the company's reputation to attract and retain and also to engage talent. And this is because individuals' unique perspectives can enable you to make business decisions. It is good for profit margins and team morale and a host of other organizational benefits. For example, research from Deloitte shows that diversity of thinking enhances innovation by 20%, and inclusive culture results in a team that's twice as likely to meet or exceed financial targets, and 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. On the other hand, if you don't get diversity and inclusion right, it can damage the reputation, it can affect the number and quality of people you can hire, which then affects business performance. So we can see that getting inclusion right at the beginning with recruitment is critical for the business. So why is it important? The moral case and an ethical employer. Differences could be visible or non-visible factors such as background, culture, personality, language, work style, or accent. There is no one size fits all in recruitment and people management because people have different personal needs, values, and beliefs. So practices and processes need to be consistently fair, but also flexible and inclusive. Surely you want to be an ethical employer because it is the right thing to do. And if this is the case, it is important that candidates are treated fairly, they are given equal opportunities and feel safe and supported. And why is it important from the legal point of view? So Equality Act 2010 outlines the rights and responsibilities of employers and employees. In the UK, age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion and belief, sex and sexual orientation are protected characteristics covered by the discrimination law to give people protection against being treated unfairly. There are risks associated with discrimination in the workplace, as it can affect an employee's well-being, performance, or their intention to stay at the company. And as a result of discrimination, employers can fail to recognize abilities and potential. And it can also result in a significant legal cost, compensation, and settlements paid when defending expensive discrimination claims. But inclusive recruitment is not limited to the protected characteristics. It is about being mindful of the unlimited types of diversity that exist in the human experience. It can be possible to focus on the protected characteristics to avoid any legal trouble, but it is important for hiring managers to see beyond that instead of doing the bare minimum. So now we have an activity about what's wrong with recruitment and selection. So I would like to ask people to comment in the chat what you think is wrong with recruitment and what do you think are the common barriers to inclusive recruitment. I'll give you one minute for the comments. Someone suggested unconscious bias, and you are right. So unconscious bias is when people stereotype certain groups of people, often without being conscious of doing it, and it needs to be mitigated, really. There is a lack of understanding amongst recruiters and hiring managers of topics like neurodiversity and the blanket approach to recruitment, for example, application forms, presentations, and so on, almost a one-size-fits-all. So you're outlining here the lack of awareness, lack of training, using the one-size-fits-all approach, which is not appropriate. Thank you for that. We've come up with a couple of elements that are wrong with recruitment and selection. Oh, we have one more. Public perception of the company can impact candidate pools. Companies don't understand that inclusive recruitment stands before shortlisting. Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. They are valuable. Thank you. And so we are going to move on. The answers that we have, prejudice and biases. And in recruitment, this can affect the job advert wording or the callback rates for interviews, and it's associated with discrimination. Biases and discrimination are key issues that impede progress towards diversity and inclusion. And as you mentioned, unconscious bias is one of them, but we also have others, just like halo or horn effect. So only focusing on the good or the bad parts, or perhaps recruiting people who are like us, which is called mirroring. So selecting candidates that are similar to you. And then discrimination examples could include inappropriate snap judgments on candidates or discriminatory interview questions during interviews. And it's crucial because all applicants need to be given the same opportunity to demonstrate their suitability for the role. Or another issue could be employers not asking if candidates require any reasonable adjustments to assist them in the recruitment process, or perhaps the application process is not accessible to all groups of applicants. Another issue could be contents discouraging suitable applicants from applying or falling into a comfortable pattern, so just hiring the same types of people. Or another issue could be that only one person shortlists candidates and then opinions are not weighted. Another issue could be shortlisting criteria not agreed upon or not based on the requirements of the role, which can lead to questions asked at the interview are not relevant to the role. Another issue could be decision making is based on first impressions or assumptions, stereotypes, and prejudice. And finally, assessing the candidate's personality rather than skills, abilities, and experience. Many of these issues can come from the fact that people are not aware of these issues and not trained how to take personal responsibility for inclusion and diversity. And it can happen to you if you don't train your people. So it is important to help educate employees and managers on a few key topics and steps that they can take. And you can have a system in place where inclusion, diversity, and equality are part of the induction training or provide training to staff. And we have a case study from Amazon, which is really interesting. So between 2014 and 2015, the multinational company built an algorithm to review CVs and automate their recruitment process. And it sounds like they have a fair process in place, which is consistent. So what could be the problem? The new recruitment engine didn't like women because the automation chose those who had been successful, particularly men, and it favored the use of more typically male language. The issue with this is that it actively undermined the company's efforts to create a fair and equal recruitment process, because this recruitment model was built on who was currently successful, not who might be in the future. So it created a bias. And now I'm going to hand you over to Kerry, who's going to give away the 10 inclusive steps in the recruitment cycle.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fanny. So, number 1, define your goals. So, first of all, you need to ask yourself what it is you want to achieve. And to really get a clear idea of that, you need data. So, if you currently don't have any, now is the time to get some. So, you want data on your current workforce so you can see whether you are underrepresented, maybe from BAME people or people with disabilities, or it could be even between males and females, that there's not like a fair distribution across the organisation. So having some data will give you a clear picture of where you currently are and the areas that you need to target. And the second thing, once you've got that, then you can, as part of your recruitment process, sort of set yourself some targets of how you're going to address the underrepresentation. So when you're looking at setting some targets, you want to think in terms of SMART targets or SMART goals. So make sure they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. If you've got a number against it, then and it's really smart, then you'll know whether you're successful or not. But the data is really important. Also think about local issues. So for example, in Cardiff, the BAME population is somewhere around about 10%. So does your workforce represent that? Or is that something that you need to target improvement? So having some data, both external within your organisation and in terms of recruitment, will enable you to make the right decisions and for the right reasons. When you're embarking then on this sort of more inclusive recruitment approach, make sure you keep your team and your stakeholders informed about what you're trying to achieve, because then they can support you and share their ideas. And the important thing is, once you develop your plan, make sure you follow through, because otherwise you won't get any improvement at all. And be really clear and get support from board and senior management. There's plenty in this for them. This is very much about reputation, which Fanny talked about earlier on, and about your business performance as a whole. So getting senior management and the board involved is really important. So step 2, formulate inclusive job descriptions. So the job description is a really key document in this whole picture. It needs to assess what you need from the person who's doing the job. And it then enables you, if you've got a job description, the person specification, which are clear and reflect the job, it then means you're going to have a more successful recruitment campaign, and you'll have clarity in terms of what you're recruiting for. Make sure you use inclusive language, so avoiding gender-based language and terms, as well as industry jargon. So masculine and feminine words are better off left out. So for example, you could use the term waitress, but if you were recruiting for that type of role, but that would tell lots of candidates that men need not apply and you're looking for a female. Whereas if you use a more neutral term, you probably get more candidates that give a better impression of your organisation as being inclusive. So when you're pulling together your advert text, use shorter sentences and brief paragraphs and a larger font, maybe 12 to 14 points. So, and some particular fonts are helpful for people with sight problems or dyslexia. So sans serif fonts, for example, Arial, Comic Sans, Verdana or Calibri, are much more easy to read for people with visual problems or dyslexia. So using those will just take one problem off the agenda. And test out whether some of the points on the person's specification are really needed for the role. Some organisations put a degree requirement on there, which isn't really necessary for the role. And that means you're losing lots of potential candidates and giving a less than inclusive picture of your organisation. So as I said earlier, we have got a document which we're going to send out afterwards on the sort of language which is best to use. So hopefully you'll find that helpful when it comes through. So step 3 is to develop an effective equality statement. So we've all seen them on job adverts. This organisation is committed to equality or something like that. And make sure that yours includes positive affirming language and talks about how the employer helps people feel included. So make sure it really counts and it helps you in your recruitment campaign. Don't use just like a standard statement. So in the slide, you can see Google statement, and we can notice how they use first person language, we and our, makes it more personal, and it stands out then by using positive words such as celebrate and thrive. So it shows they've thought about this. This is not just like, oh, other organisations use a statement, we'll use theirs. This is very much about them and gives a very much more inclusive picture of the organisation. You can also give some examples to support your statement. So sometimes you could add a statement in there that sort of says about, maybe give some examples and shows real personality for your organisation and why you think this is really valuable, why you're committed. And we talked earlier on about Amazon and Google, and they're huge companies. So you could be thinking, oh, they got the resources, which they have, but these steps that we're going to look at today are fairly small things in the main, and any organisation can do them. So don't be put off by looking at case studies, which are huge, because the principles you could do in any organisation. So step 4 is incorporate your equality statement into your employer brand. So we ran a session a few weeks ago on employer brand, and it's hugely important. An organisation's reputation will help to drive candidates to your vacancies. So find ways to communicate your commitment to inclusion to different groups of applicants. Make sure it's true. So think about, don't make promises you're not going to be able to fulfill, but really make it authentic. So for example, sharing experiences of employees who've already come from a diverse background, who are working in your organisation. So obviously get their consent first. You don't want them sort of surprised and stunned to see their life experience in the newspaper. But if they're content to do this, just giving their experiences could really help other people to be attracted to your organisation. And then something not to be overlooked is if you're going to use imagery or pictures in your job adverts, make sure they represent a diverse range of people, because this will colour people's impression of your organisation. So now, enough of me talking, we've got a poll. So where do you advertise job openings or job vacancies? So if you could go into the poll and tick all those that are relevant, that would really be helpful. Okay, so thanks for doing that. If we could just share the results, that would be good. So obviously a broad range, so potential options, online job sites, newspapers, there's quite a few of the options are used, but some much more than others. So online job sites are sort of commonly used, as we can see. And where it's quite good is you can provide a lot more information with online compared to years ago where people used newspapers when the cost of the advert was huge. So it's good to see that everyone's using a broad range of things. And employee referrals I'm a bit intrigued by, because in a tight labour market, using every option open to you is a good thing. And if we're happy with the quality of the staff we've already got, and they know people who could come and contribute further, it sounds like a good result to me. Okay, so we're going to move on from there. Right, okay, so we've looked at the different options you're currently using. So for those that may be focusing on just say 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 of those options, one of the things you can do is expand your reach. So look at other types of options. So even if you're using online, maybe there's different websites which would be more helpful to you. Once you've got your target, you know what sort of publications to look for, or what types of websites. So try using different places that'll open up the chance of recruiting the sort of people, not the sort of people, the people with the characteristics you're looking to increase representation on. So for example, job centres, virtual job fairs, social networks, these may help you when you're trying to achieve your target and become more representative. So instead of just using maybe generic job boards, you could advertise on specialist job boards. So 2 examples could be women in tech or BAME job boards. So if you've got sort of areas of underrepresentation that you can see from your data, looking at where the best places to try and access those people would be a really good thing to do. And then we sort of mentioned it earlier on, but think about the sort of language you're using. So strong, champion, those sort of terms may put off female applicants. So bear that in mind when you're pulling the advert together, but also think about accessibility standards. So you don't want to put off people with disabilities because they're a fairly large percentage of the population, so higher than you think. So making sure that you consider sort of accessibility standards so that we don't put off people who would otherwise be really good candidates. So step 6, allow for reasonable adjustments in the recruitment process, not just as part of the interview, but also including the application and assessment stages as well. So reasonable adjustments can be provided easily by employers, and they can include additional support or a change in the format for assessment, to make sure that disabled people in particular are not treated less favourably. So the Equality Act 2010 says that employers have to have a duty to make reasonable adjustments to ensure that a disabled person is not treated less favourably. But ACAS as well says that if people need reasonable adjustments for any part of the recruitment process, including the advert, the application process, the interviews, assessments, shortlisting and selection, then employers are well served to take those on board, because it will increase the type of response they get to their adverts. So although it's the applicant's responsibility to inform the employer of what they need, then employers should take the initiative, so that if they're asking, do you need any support, then it's a statement of commitment. It shows you really mean it, and that anybody is included in this organisation and valued. And obviously bear in mind that asking people or applicants whether they got a disability would be unlawful. So just make sure you don't fall foul for that one, would be helpful. So step 7, use a standardised job interview process and establish a diverse interview panel. So one of the key areas here is making sure you've got a set list of questions which are focused on the job. So this will enable you to include some scoring, maybe to add some notes there so that it'll remind you of relevant information, and making sure everyone's asked consistent questions. Also, make sure on the sheet that you've got the ideal answers, so that will keep your focus around what you really need, and that will really set the tone and make sure you don't end up considering factors which were never on the person's specification in the first place. The interview panel itself, if you've got a range of people on there, that having an interview panel will give you a range of opinions, but if they're also diverse, that will also give a statement about your organisation. So thinking about that beforehand would be really good. And don't ask questions that you really don't need the answer to. So if it's not relevant to the job, then ask yourself why you're asking it. So particularly questions about race, age, religion, or other protected characteristics, they should never be asked as part of any selection or interview process. And again, we'll help you further through the inclusive language freebie that we're sending out. So step 8. Think about technology. So many companies these days use technology for the recruitment process, and it can certainly save time. So some of the things that it can do, if for those that are not using it, is where you give some sort of an activity or try and get some sort of test of people's ability beforehand. They could do grading of those assignments. It can help with defining key decision criteria and scoring against that, and also collecting and tracking demographic data. So technology, which could be around diversity-driven applicant matching, can take the whole process one step further by speeding up the process and minimising unconscious bias. So there can be really good things about it, and certainly you could save time. But as we saw with the Amazon case study, it can also cause us problems too. So taking a challenging look at what you got out of using the computer system, the technology, can help us to pick up if there's any bias being introduced as part of that. And you could also get job description analysis tools. So that might help in removing bias as well from job adverts. So a few things there to think about. If you're not using those already, it might be something worth having a look at. Then step 9, make sure the shortlisting process is fair. This is a key stage in the whole process, really. So deciding in advance what's in the person's specification, and then using some sort of a matrix so that all your assessment of the candidate is based on that. And having at least 2 people involved in shortlisting will help to mitigate any bias or discrimination. And it's good to use, and I'm sure this is very basic, so you'll be doing this already, good to use blind application forms where the names of the quality data are removed beforehand, because that way it takes out some of the potential discrimination. And one of the most important areas is to make sure your recruiters are trained. So don't be surprised if you haven't provided any training, if you end up getting unforeseen consequences. So making sure you train people is worth the investment. And then step 10, measuring and monitoring your inclusive hiring program. So if you're going to do this, it'll take a bit of your time. So as in all good practice, carrying out a review is a really good thing to do. So carrying out the review and then using quantitative and qualitative data on inclusion and diversity in the organisation and what's happened as part of your recruitment campaign will help to highlight where the barriers are, will show the impact of any initiatives you've used. Employee surveys as well can evaluate initiatives and policies. So as Cobalt HR, we use a joiner survey, and that gives us valuable information on how the recruitment process has gone. So we can recommend those if you're not doing them already. Some benchmarking against other organisations is really valuable, because that way you know how you compare and how much of a gap there is between your performance and others. And that will also potentially give you some food for thought on what you can do about it. And then keeping your workforce data up to date is really key. So people can acquire a disability, for example, at any point in their life. So updating your data regularly means you can pick up on any changes. And certainly if you're going to have some success in terms of your recruitment campaigns, you'll see that feeding through to your workforce data. So that will be really helpful to you as well. So those are our 10 key steps. And just to sort of cover briefly how we could help you if you did need some support. We could help with designing, implementing and monitoring inclusive recruitment processes. We can help employers and hiring managers foster the right environment while ensuring legal compliance and best practice throughout the whole process. We can help with writing job descriptions and person specification and making sure they're inclusive, and also developing robust recruitment and selection policies which to support your commitment to inclusion. We could deliver some unconscious bias training, and we talked earlier on about how important that is, and helping you always round really to try and embed diversity and inclusion into your organisation's culture so that people can see the difference. So my next slide is, are you hungry for more? So obviously we've covered a lot of information here so far, but you might want a bit more support. So we're pleased to tell you that we can use the information that we've covered today and develop it further. And we're going to provide a half-day training session on how to implement inclusive steps in your recruitment. So it'll be a little bit more like a workshop based on your data. So, so we'll send some information out about that. But for those of you who are maybe starting off or could do with a bit of support, then obviously that might be something of interest. As part of that, we will look at some more case studies. So we looked at one earlier on, but we'll look at some others and dig deeper on the 10 steps so you feel a bit more confident about putting it all into practice. So in terms of a summary, anyone who is looking to add value to the workforce and their organisation's bottom line will benefit from an inclusive hiring strategy. Committed employers take personal responsibility for achieving diversity and inclusion because it aligns with their personal values. It yields innovation, creativity and fresh perspectives. So having an inclusive hiring process is ethical, it's the right thing to do, and it will help to protect the organisation from damage to its reputation and legal costs that could come your way if you don't get it right. Obviously today we've got a really tight labour market, so we can also make the difference between being able to recruit someone and not. So we need to think differently. And just to quote something from Verna Myers, she said, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. So I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's important not just to be committed, but actually to doing something about it and coming up with a plan. So I'm now going to hand over to Nick. So Nick's going to talk about the help that can come from Cardiff and Vale College. So we talked about some of the support we can give at Cobalt HR, but Cardiff and Vale College have a number of areas that can also benefit your team. So if I could ask Nick to come on the call, please, that'd be good.
Thank you, Kerry. That was great to listen to and some really insightful information there, really beneficial. Hi, good morning, guys. So my name is Nick Easton. I'm one of the business consultants here at Cardiff and Vale College. Just alongside with Kerry and Cobalt HR, just here really to touch on how we can support you as businesses or organisations. Just really talk about the free funding for courses that we've got at the moment. So as you can see on the slide at the moment, Kerry's team has done for me, which is brilliant. We have a number of ILM qualifications which are fully funded up until July 2023. So if there's anything that interests you or you want to discuss more around ILMs and stuff like that, please get in touch with me. My email on the screen. But other than that, we have another wide range of courses. So we have a number of personal learning account courses. Okay, so we have 2 different funding streams for that, and that's one through the company route with myself, or individuals can apply directly through the college website, but there's a number of criteria they need to hit for that. But these courses are wide range. We've probably got 30, 40 courses, if not more, through our personal learning accounts. And again, these are wide range and hit many different needs of businesses. One that's been very popular over the last 12 months has been our mental health first aid course, which is roll on, roll off, and they're running every week at the moment. But again, there's lots and lots of different opportunities and lots of different ways that we can support you as a business. And again, these are fully funded courses. And again, to find out how they can meet your needs and how you can meet the funding elements to be fully funded, just get in touch with myself and we can have a chat about that. And I can talk you through what it looks like. But then just as very much like Kerry touched on, again, there's lots of other ways we can support, and there's bespoke elements that we can potentially deliver, whether it's fully funded or as a cost course. But again, just talk to me, have a chat with me, just drop me a message and we can discuss it and see what training and support we can offer you as a college. But yeah, thank you, Kerry.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nick. And we'll send Nick's contact details out after, so if you haven't got them, you'll have them then, which is great. So just by way of a brief reflection, can you just maybe put in the chat what your key takeaways are from today's session? So it'd be useful for us to get a bit of quick feedback. Anything that you found surprising, or any techniques which you think you're going to use, anything you want to know some further information about. So if you could take a minute just to give us a little bit of feedback, that would be great. Okay, well, while you're thinking about that, I'll just talk you through next steps. First off, thanks very much for attending today. It's been great to see you. We will send you the slides and the freebies we talked about during the session. We'll also send you a survey link so you can give us a bit of feedback, and we'd really appreciate if you could do that for us. We try and improve these, and we're running them fairly regularly now, so having some feedback will enable us to make them even better. And we've also got some training opportunities coming up, so we're going to send you a leaflet with the information on those as well. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for one of those in the future. That would be great.